I've never liked corporate events. They always feel like a weird cross between a class reunion and a hostage situation. Everybody's smiling too much, networking like it's a competitive sport, pretending to care about who's climbing the org chart. That's not me. I'm more of a quiet Friday night at home kind of guy. But my wife, Julie? She loved them. Loved the little games, the resort venues, the catered meals where everyone fought over who could pretend to eat the least. She said it was important for her image at work, for her chances at the next promotion. I never questioned it. She'd worked hard to get where she was, and I supported that. This one was a lakeside retreat near Norman Lake. A nice enough spot tucked away in the hills 2 hours out. Julie left early Friday morning, rolling suitcase in tow, wearing one of those blazers she bought to look approachable but authoritative. She kissed me goodbye at the door, her hand lingering on mine a second too long. Looking back now, I wonder if there was hesitation in that touch, something she was trying to say without saying it. But I didn't notice at the time. I just told her to have fun and reminded her not to forget her allergy meds. She laughed, said, "What would I do without you?" and was gone. That evening, I was walking past the bathroom when I spotted her makeup bag still sitting on the counter. Not the everyday stuff, but the small travel bag she always brought for overnights. Right next to it was a bar of that dark chocolate she loved, the kind she insisted made hotel rooms feel like home. I picked both up, thinking she'd probably be annoyed without them. Then I paused. It was silly maybe, but something told me to take them to her. Just drop by, surprise her, maybe even meet a few of her coworkers I hadn't talked to in a while. We hadn't been connecting much lately, and I figured a small gesture might be good for us. Besides, it was just a short drive. I packed the items in a paper bag, grabbed a jacket, and hit the road. The drive was peaceful, the kind of long stretch where you get lost in thought. I remember watching the sun dip behind the trees, casting orange light across the highway, thinking how strange it was to feel lonely in a marriage. We hadn't fought. There was no shouting or name-calling. Just distance. A coldness that had crept in so gradually, I didn't notice until I realized we hadn't had a real conversation in weeks. When I pulled into the driveway of the house her company had rented, the first thing I noticed was the cars. They were everywhere. Lined up along the gravel drive, parked half on the grass, all newer models, sleek, expensive, the kind of cars you lease to feel successful. I thought, wow, they really went all out for this. It looked like everyone was already there. But as I stepped out of the car, something felt off. It was too quiet. No laughter. No music. No clinking glasses or buzz of conversation drifting from the house. Just the sound of cicadas and the occasional splash of water from the lake out back. I hesitated for a moment, then walked up to the front door. It was slightly ajar. Not wide open, not shut, just enough that it creaked when I touched it. "Hello?" I called out. Nothing. I stepped inside, the wood floor creaking under my feet. The place was beautiful, vaulted ceilings, open concept everything, tastefully rustic decor. But empty. Like a model home, staged and lifeless. I wandered a little farther, expecting to hear voices or maybe catch someone coming down the stairs. That's when I heard it. Faint at first. Then unmistakable. Moaning. Not just any moaning, in asterisk mate, rhythmic, unmistakably private. My body went still. Every hair on my arm stood up. I followed the sound down a long hallway to the right, the kind that stretches just a bit too long in houses like this. At the end, a door was cracked open, yellow light spilling out into the dark. I didn't need to get closer. I already knew what I was hearing. Her voice. Julie's voice. Not the polite tone she used at work. Not the tired voice I'd grown used to hearing at night. This was breathy, almost unrecognizable in its intensity. But it was her. I froze. My mind went blank. My hands, still holding the bag with her makeup and chocolate, trembled. I didn't move. Didn't knock. Didn't burst in. Just stood there, trying to process what my ears were telling me, but my heart refused to believe. I set the bag down on the carpet outside the door. Quietly. Slowly. Like laying flowers at a grave. And then I turned around. My steps were silent as I walked back down the hallway, but my heartbeat was deafening. I didn't know what to do with my hands, my breath, my thoughts. Everything inside me was vibrating, but outwardly I was calm. Or at least, I think I was. As I reached the bottom of the stairs, I nearly collided with someone coming around the corner, a man, maybe late 30s, in a polo and slacks. One of Julie's coworkers, I guessed. I remembered him vaguely from a holiday party. He stopped short when he saw me, eyes wide like a deer in headlights. Then he looked down, stepped aside, and walked away without saying a word. That said everything. I walked out the front door, got in my car, and started driving. No direction, just away. The road blurred under the headlights, and I didn't even realize how fast I was going until I saw the trees whipping past. I pulled over eventually, parking on the shoulder, hands gripping the wheel like it was the only thing keeping me tethered to reality. My phone rang. It was her. I stared at the screen, that familiar contact photo, her smiling at the beach last summer, wind in her hair. I almost didn't answer, but some part of me still needed to hear her voice. "Simon," she said when I picked up. Her tone was too upbeat, too casual. "Hey, did you just stop by? I thought I heard something earlier." I didn't answer. I think you might have misheard something," she continued quickly, voice trembling now. "It was just a team-building exercise. Like a trust game thing. Kinda weird, I know. But totally innocent. You know how these retreats get." Her voice cracked on innocent. I still didn't speak. "Simon," she said again. "You there?" But I wasn't. Not really. I was somewhere else entirely, standing outside that half-open door, hearing something I was never meant to hear, watching the moment my marriage fractured into pieces too small to glue back together. I hung up, and I kept driving. The next morning, I woke up in my car, parked just outside a rest stop 2 exits south of nowhere. I hadn't meant to sleep there, but I couldn't bring myself to go home. Not yet. Not while the weight of what I'd heard, what I hadn't seen, but fully understood, sat on my chest like a stone. I bought a gas station coffee, took a walk around the parking lot just to prove to myself that I was still tethered to the earth, and then finally drove home. The sun was just starting to rise when I pulled into the driveway. The house looked the same, but I didn't. Something inside me had shifted, and I couldn't put it back. Julie was already home. Her car was in the driveway. That surprised me. Maybe she'd left the retreat early, maybe she hadn't stayed the night at all. Either way, I wasn't ready to face her. So I didn't. I sat in the car for 20 minutes before slipping inside, quiet as a ghost, and went straight upstairs to the spare bedroom. I locked the door behind me and just sat there in silence. And that's when I started connecting the dots. You always hear about the signs, the classic behaviors of someone with a secret. But living inside the pattern, you miss them until they're shouting at you. Julie had been different for a while. Not in big, dramatic ways, just little shifts that I chalked up to work stress or personal reinvention. It started maybe 3 months back. One night, she came home late, said it was a project meeting that ran long. She was wearing a button-down shirt I didn't recognize. I remember asking about it, and she told me it was a sample from the office, something one of her coworkers had given her to try on for sizing. I didn't push. A few days later, she changed her perfume. No warning. Just a new scent, stronger, muskier. She said the old one gave her headaches. And then came the wardrobe upgrades. Dresses that hugged her figure a little more tightly. Heels she used to say hurt her feet. Suddenly, she had a fresh manicure every week and kept talking about how she needed to present better at leadership meetings. Maybe she did. Maybe none of it meant anything on its own. But the silence between us got louder. Our evening rituals vanished. The shows we used to binge together? Replaced by her sitting on the other side of the couch with AirPods in, claiming she was catching up on industry podcasts. I couldn't remember the last time we had cooked together. Or laughed about something stupid. Or even just sat in bed talking about nothing. Then there was her phone. It was always on silent now. I'd walk into a room and see her angle the screen away from me, fingers darting across the glass. She started bringing it with her into the bathroom, which she never used to do. If I asked who she was texting, she'd say, just work stuff, and change the subject. One time, she left it charging while she showered. I saw a notification light up, a restaurant check-in from a place she said she'd never been to. She claimed it was a glitch, something someone else had tagged her in by accident. I wanted to believe her. But trust doesn't live on belief alone. It needs truth. And I hadn't felt that in months. Then there was the laptop. One night while she was asleep, I passed by the kitchen and saw her MacBook open on the island, still glowing. Multiple tabs were open. I wasn't snooping, at least not at first, but one caught my eye. A hotel reservation site. I assumed it was for our anniversary trip, but the date was off. It was for 2 weeks later. I remember asking her about it the next day. She smiled and said, just planning ahead. But we hadn't even agreed on a destination yet. I kept brushing these things aside. Because it's easier to be suspicious than to confront. It's easier to convince yourself you're imagining it than to admit the person you love might be slipping through your fingers. The day after the retreat, Julie acted like everything was normal. She made breakfast. Wore one of those soft sweaters I liked. Even kissed me on the cheek before heading out to work. Like none of it had happened. But everything had changed. I spent that Sunday going through memories. Not just photos, but moments. Her laugh when we used to burn toast on lazy weekends. The way she used to leave little sticky notes on the fridge with silly drawings. All of it had gone quiet. Not suddenly. Gradually. so slowly that I mistook the stillness for peace. I tried talking to her that night. I didn't bring up the retreat. Just asked her how she'd been feeling lately, if she thought we were still us. She looked at me with tired eyes and said, "Why do you always assume something's wrong? Can't we just be normal for once?" She went back to her phone after that. I went back to silence. But I wasn't going to stay in the dark anymore. That night, after she fell asleep, I went into the attic and dug out an old tablet, one I had given her a few years ago. We'd used it on trips, synced our accounts to make things easier. I wasn't even sure it still worked. It did. And apparently, her phone had stayed synced to the tablet all this time. At first, I hesitated. I told myself I shouldn't go through it, that it was a breach of privacy. But then I thought about that hallway. That moan. That man's face when he saw me and looked away. I opened the messaging app, and everything unraveled. There were hundreds of texts. Some recent, some months old. Her messages with someone named Charlie. Photos. Voice notes. Messages that started professional and slowly bled into the personal. Then the romantic. Then the *mate. Charlie. The deputy CFO. I remembered him from the annual company gala. Polished. Suave. A little too smooth. Julie had mentioned him a few times, usually in the context of work stress. I'd never thought much of it. They had been seeing each other for at least 8 months. Maybe longer. One message, sent the night of our wedding anniversary, was a photo. Not of us. Of her in lingerie I'd never seen before, captioned, "Thinking of last weekend. Still can't believe how good it felt." He responded with a picture of a bottle of wine and the words counting down to the next. I stared at the screen, my heart pounding in my throat. I felt sick. Physically nauseous. She had lied to me. Repeatedly. Brazenly. I checked our shared bank account. 2 recent purchases stood out, a decorative brooch and a bottle of men's cologne, both charged to a boutique she claimed sold vintage gifts. She told me the brooch was for her mom's birthday. Now I knew better. She had handed me the receipts to her betrayal and smiled while doing it. I couldn't sleep that night. I just sat there, scrolling through months of messages. Love notes. Weekend plans. Whispered I miss yous and can't wait TOS. It was all there, in black and white. There was no denying it anymore. Whatever part of me had been holding on to hope, it finally gave out. And all that was left was the truth. The woman I loved had been living a second life. And I had been the fool in the first one. By Monday morning, I was operating on 3 hours of sleep and a lifetime's worth of clarity. The messages between Julie and Charlie had replayed in my mind like a looped horror film. I couldn't unsee the photos. Couldn't unhear the voice notes she'd sent him, soft-spoken and sweet in ways she hadn't been with me in months. I remembered one where she laughed and whispered, "You're the only part of this retreat that felt real." That one hurt the most. I didn't say anything to her that morning. I couldn't. I watched her pack her work tote like it was any other day. She was humming to herself. She even kissed me on the cheek again, this time lighter, more mechanical. A routine. And I stood there, letting her do it, knowing she'd just sent a heart emoji to another man 3 hours earlier. I spent that day at home, alone. I called in sick, not that anyone asked many questions. My job was flexible enough to give me space. I sat at the kitchen table, tablet in front of me, and dug deeper. I don't know what I was hoping to find. Closure? A reason? Maybe some explanation that made all of it seem less calculated. Instead, I found more betrayal. Their affair went deeper than I'd thought. It wasn't just stolen weekends and flirty texts. They had a schedule. Coordinated days off. They had code words, meetings that weren't meetings, wellness breaks that were thinly veiled hotel rendezvous. Charlie had been using his corporate card, 2 Uber rides, upscale dinners, even a suite at a hotel we'd once stayed at for our 3rd anniversary. That part made my stomach turn. He took her somewhere that was supposed to be ours. Julie even helped him cover it up once. In one thread, Charlie panicked about a potential audit of his expense report. She coached him on what to label the dinner, a client reconnection. She added a winking emoji. I remember staring at that emoji for way too long, as if it held some answer I hadn't already uncovered. But what really tore me apart wasn't the logistics. It was the moments. The little lines that reminded me of how she used to talk to me. She called him babe. She talked about her day with him. Sent him pictures of her lunch, her outfits, sunsets she thought were beautiful. Things she stopped sharing with me months ago. It was like watching the ghost of our marriage walk around in someone else's life. And then I found the message that broke me. It was from the night of our 10th anniversary. We hadn't done much, just dinner at a local bistro. She had seemed distracted the whole night, blaming a headache. We didn't even finish the dessert. She kissed me on the forehead and said, "Sorry, babe. Just tired." Rain check. That night, after I fell asleep, she had sent Charlie a photo of herself in that same restaurant bathroom. She was smiling. Caption, told him I had a migraine. You were the only part one wanted to celebrate with. Charlie replied, soon it'll just be us. Soon. It'll just be us. She had said she was tired. She had said she loved me. That night, I took the tablet and threw it across the room. It hit the carpet and bounced off a chair leg. Didn't break. I almost wished it had. I picked it back up and stared at the screen again, hating how much of my heart was still trying to protect her, to rationalize, to find some alternate version of the story where it wasn't what it looked like. But it was. Later that week, I tried to go back to normal. I went to work, I made coffee, I even texted my brother about a football game. But everything was filtered through a haze of betrayal. I couldn't hear someone say trust without feeling like I was being gutted. I couldn't look at Julie without hearing Charlie's voice notes in my head. I watched her differently now. She was careful with her phone. She started locking her laptop. One night, I watched her delete an entire thread while pretending to check her email. I don't think she knew I saw her. Or maybe she did and didn't care anymore. And still, I didn't confront her. Why? Because I didn't want an argument. I didn't want tears or denials or another, it's not what it looks like. I didn't want her to twist the story until I was the villain for looking. I wanted to leave no room for doubt. So I got organized. I created a folder on a password-protected drive, backed up in 2 places. Inside it, I collected *TS of texts, images, voice notes, GPS locations. I cross-referenced timestamps with receipts and calendar entries. I added transaction histories, photos of the cologne she claimed was for her father, and the hotel reservation she said was a future anniversary idea. I even recorded a voice memo of myself recounting what I heard at the lake house hallway just so I'd remember the raw truth if I ever started doubting it. The day after I compiled everything, I made an appointment with a divorce attorney. I didn't tell Julie. I didn't act cold or distant. I kissed her on the forehead, made her coffee, and even wished her luck on a presentation she said she had. She smiled like nothing was wrong. That night, she sent Charlie a photo from our living room, her feet on the couch, a glass of wine in hand. Caption, presentation went well. You'd be proud. Wish I was with you instead. Wish I was with you instead. That's what she said while sitting in a home I'd built wearing pajamas I bought her for Christmas. I looked at the picture carefully. In the corner of the frame, just barely visible, was the mug I'd given her for our 3rd Valentine's Day. It had a quote on it, something cheesy about love and loyalty. She used to drink tea from it when she had a cold. Now it was a prop and a lie. That weekend, Julie said she had a work brunch. She dressed nice, clean lines, light jewelry, a little more perfume than usual. I offered to drive her just to see what she'd say. She smiled. You don't have to, babe. I'm meeting the girls at the cafe downtown. You'd hate it, nothing but shop talk. I said nothing. She left at 10. I waited until 10:30, then checked the GPS log from her synced phone. She wasn't at the cafe. She was at the hotel again. Same one from our anniversary. Room 317. She had reserved it under her name this time. I didn't follow her. Didn't show up or bang on the door. I just took a *T, saved it. Then I went to my lawyer's office and signed the papers. That night, she came home humming. I was sitting on the back porch, watching the wind push through the trees. She leaned against the doorway and said, "You okay out here?" I turned and looked at her. "Just enjoying the quiet," I said. She smiled and went inside. And for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel confused or hurt or desperate to fix something that was already gone. I felt clear. I had all the answers I needed. Now it was time to act. I didn't leave with drama. No bags flung into the trunk, no screaming matches or ultimatums. Just a single packed duffel bag and a printed copy of the divorce filing left face down on the kitchen counter. Julie was still asleep when I walked out. I had made sure of that. I waited until her breathing deepened into that rhythmic softness I used to find comforting. Now it just sounded like a song from another life. It was just after 6 in the morning. The sun hadn't quite risen and the sky was that hazy pre-dawn gray. I didn't even bother with breakfast. I just grabbed my keys, slipped on a hoodie, and walked out of the house we had called ours for nearly a decade. It felt like walking out of a museum, familiar, full of relics, but no longer alive. I drove for hours with no real plan. First west, then south. I stopped only once at a gas station outside of town where I bought 2 bottles of water, a bag of peanuts, and a lighter. I didn't know why I picked up the lighter at the time. Maybe it was instinct. Eventually, I landed in a motel on the edge of nowhere. Just past a forgotten truck stop, one of those places that smelled faintly of cigarettes no matter how many times they replaced the bedding. The room key was a worn plastic card. The lady behind the counter didn't ask questions. I didn't turn on the TV. I didn't check my email. I powered off my phone, took out the charger, and zipped it into the side pocket of my bag like I was burying a wee *p***n. For the next 4 days, I didn't speak to another human being. I stared at the ceiling. I wrote in a notebook I found in the motel drawer, a yellow legal pad someone had left behind. Page after page. Nothing profound. Just words. My thoughts. Lists. Things I remembered about her. Things I hated now. Memories that wouldn't let go. Moments that, in retrospect, were clues I should have noticed. A map of mistakes lined in ink. Day 2, I took the bag of old photos I'd brought, pictures from our first trip to Asheville, our wedding day, our first Christmas as a married couple, and burned them in a tin trash can behind the building. It felt melodramatic and ridiculous at first. But the moment that first photo curled into black, I didn't feel ridiculous anymore. I watched our smiles disappear into ash. And then I breathed. It wasn't peace. Not yet. But it was something close. On the third night, I opened the window and listened to the sound of trucks speeding by on the highway. I thought about calling someone, my brother, maybe. But what would I say? I didn't want sympathy. I didn't want advice. I didn't want to hear, "You'll get through this," because I wasn't trying to get through anything. I was letting it all fall apart. And that felt right. Sometimes silence is the only voice that tells the truth. Julie texted me for the first time around noon on the 4th day. "Where are you?" I didn't reply. An hour later, "We need to talk. Please." Then, "I'm sorry. I don't know what happened. I didn't mean for things to go this far." That one made me laugh. Not because it was funny, but because it was absurd. Like someone apologizing after driving a car through your living room. Didn't mean for it to go this far. As if you could accidentally fall into months of deception. Then she tried guilt. "You've just disappeared. That's not fair." Fair? I tossed the phone onto the motel nightstand and didn't look at it again until morning. Her messages started to shift after that, from apologies to excuses. Then blame. "If you had just talked to me sooner." We both let things drift. Charlie didn't mean anything. I was just confused. "You weren't even really here anymore, Simon." That last one stuck with me. You weren't really here anymore. That's how cheaters rewrite history. They shift the story to make it seem like abandonment, as if distance is permission. As if silence is consent. I could have screamed every day for the last 6 months, and it wouldn't have stopped her from choosing someone else. From giving away the parts of herself I'd once believed were sacred. Eventually, I turned the phone off again. I went back to the silence. Back to the notebook. Day 5, I returned to the house. She wasn't there. I had texted her that morning simply, "I need to get some things. Be gone when I arrive." She didn't reply. The house felt different. Colder, somehow. I walked from room to room like I was touring a place that had already been sold. I packed methodically clothes, tools, the keepsakes I still cared about. I took the woodworking set from the garage, the leather-bound books my dad left me, and my grandfather's watch. Everything else I left. I didn't take photos off the walls. I didn't touch the wedding album. I didn't even go into the master bedroom. It wasn't mine anymore. Before I left, I scribbled a note and left it on the fridge. No signature. "You chose this. I'm choosing peace." Then I walked out. This time, it felt final. I stayed with my cousin for a few days. She didn't ask for details. Just offered me a beer, a spare key, and a pull-out couch. I slept more in those 3 days than I had in the last 3 months. Julie tried again. She called, texted, left voicemails. Each one sounded more unhinged than the last. Like she was trying to convince herself as much as me. She started reaching out to mutual friends asking if I was okay, if I was saying anything about her. One messaged me. "Hey man, Julie's saying you misunderstood something? That you're blowing it out of proportion?" That was when I knew she wasn't done lying. Not even to herself. She showed up at my parents' place 2 days later. I wasn't there. I hadn't even told them the full story yet, just that we were taking space. But she filled in the blanks for them with her version, that I'd gone off the deep end, that I was accusing her of things that weren't really true, that I was paranoid. My mom called me afterward. She said Julie cried. Said she looked like a wreck. Then she said something that made me freeze. Simon, she didn't deny it. Not once. Just kept saying it wasn't serious. Wasn't serious. I guess that was supposed to soften it. But betrayal isn't measured by how serious it is. It's measured by the weight of what you lose because of it. And I had lost everything I thought we were. The next morning, I stood outside the courthouse, paperwork in hand. I stared at the glass doors for a long time, holding the manila envelope against my chest like a shield. Inside were months of messages, photos, logs, every lie she had told, every thread of her second life. The wind was cold. My fingers were steady, and as I stepped through those doors, I knew one thing for certain. The storm had passed. Now it was time to rebuild. I always thought filing for divorce would feel like pulling the trigger on AG** and you didn't want to fire. Loud, messy, regretful. But when I sat in my attorney's office and signed the final page, it was quiet. Methodical. Like submitting paperwork to cancel a subscription I never should have renewed in the first place. Her name on the document, Julie and Carrington, looked foreign now. Like someone I used to know but had long since buried. We had spent nearly 11 years together. And here I was, untangling a decade of a shared life with the click of a pen. My attorney, Nora, was sharp. Cold in all the right ways. She didn't offer condolences or ask if I was doing okay. She asked for evidence. Structure. Timelines. Dates. And I gave her everything. The messages. The photos. The hotel receipts. A perfectly curated narrative of betrayal neatly packaged in digital form. You've built a solid case, she said, flipping through the file I prepared. We'll file with evidence of adultery. It may not change everything financially, but it'll weigh in your favor. It did. The court date was set 3 weeks out. In that time, Julie tried to negotiate behind the scenes. She messaged me twice, long, emotional blocks of text about how she didn't want things to get ugly, how we could handle this as adults, how lawyers only make things worse. Translation: don't let the truth leave the walls of our house. I didn't respond. She called my parents again. She called my brother. Claimed it was a phase. Said Charlie was just a distraction, that it wasn't real. That she was lost and trying to find herself. My brother, God bless him, told her flat out, "You should have found yourself before you found someone else's hotel bed." Julie's tone shifted after that. She stopped apologizing and started bargaining. She offered to walk away without contesting the house if I agreed to keep things off public record. No fault. No evidence. Just irreconcilable differences. A clean, quiet exit. But I wasn't giving her the dignity of revision. She had rewritten our marriage in secret. I wasn't going to let her do the same to its ending. When the hearing came, I sat on one side of the courtroom in a navy suit that didn't quite fit the same way it used to. Julie sat across from me in a cream blouse and the same necklace I'd given her 2 anniversaries ago. She wouldn't meet my eyes. Her attorney looked uncomfortable, like he'd just been hired to defend a guilty client in a trial he didn't want to be part of. The judge was no nonsense. Middle-aged, stern, efficient. Nora stood first, presenting our case. "We are filing for divorce on the grounds of infidelity," she said clearly. "Evidence has been submitted, including digital communications, financial records, and location tracking. The timeline of the extramarital affair has been corroborated by multiple data points." Julie didn't say anything. She sat perfectly still. I watched her fingers twist the hem of her sleeve. Her mouth moved like she wanted to say something, but she didn't. Her lawyer offered no rebuttal. We moved quickly into asset division. The house? Mine. I had renovated it with my own hands, paid the mortgage every month. She hadn't contributed financially since switching jobs 2 years ago. That part wasn't hard to argue. The car? Mine as well. Joint savings? Split. But I was awarded an additional portion as compensation for emotional distress, thanks in part to the documentation I'd provided. Julie requested to keep a few pieces of furniture, some kitchenware, and items of sentimental value. I didn't contest any of it. If the memories she left behind were worth anything, she could have them. I had no interest in the crumbs of a life she had already abandoned. When it was done, the judge looked at both of us and said, "Divorce granted. Final decree will be issued in 2 weeks." That was it. 11 years reduced to a stamp on a paper. As we stood, Julie walked past me. For a second, I thought she might say something. Her mouth opened slightly, but nothing came out. She kept walking. Outside the courthouse, Nora turned to me and said, "You did everything right. That matters more than you think." I nodded. Then I sat in my car for 20 minutes, staring at the dashboard. Not crying. Not angry. Just still. Later that night, I went back to the house. My house. The one with walls I had painted, floors I had sanded, a backyard I once imagined kids playing in. Now it was quiet. Empty in a way that didn't hurt anymore. I walked into the living room and noticed something small, a silver picture frame missing from the end table. She'd taken it. It used to hold a photo of us in Colorado, standing on a snow-covered hilltop, bundled in coats, grinning like fools. I hadn't thought about that trip in years. I smiled barely. Let her keep it. Let her keep the image of us frozen in a moment she traded for a fling with a man who didn't even show up to court. Speaking of Charlie, I'd learned through my attorney that he'd been quietly transferred to another branch. Not fired. Not promoted. Just moved. Swept under the rug. A stain the company didn't want to acknowledge. Julie didn't mention him during the proceedings. Not once. Not even when she had the chance to frame things differently. I don't know if she was protecting him or just too ashamed to say his name. Either way, he was gone from the narrative. After the decree came through in the mail, I scanned it into my files, then lit a fire in the fireplace. I burned every hard copy of our joint paperwork, mortgage docs, anniversary cards, printed photos. Watching those pages curl and blacken felt like a ritual. Like an exorcism. Julie messaged me the next day. Just one line. I didn't think it would end like this. I didn't reply. Because of course she didn't. She thought she'd manage the damage. That I'd fold. That we'd sweep it under the rug like a bad dream. But I hadn't. I stood up. I saw it through. I chose truth over comfort. And when it was over, I wasn't broken. I was free. I thought silence would follow the final decree. Instead, Julie got louder, just not to me. A week after the divorce was finalized, a mutual friend forwarded me a post from her social media. It was a long caption under a photo of her standing alone by the lake, that lake. The same one from the retreat. Her caption read like a personal manifesto. Sometimes we lose ourselves in other people's expectations. This year has been about finding my voice. She didn't mention me directly. But she didn't have to. The implication was clear. I had silenced her. Controlled her. That the affair, now hinted at as some metaphorical awakening, was the result of emotional neglect. The comments poured in, people we knew and people we didn't. Strangers cheering her on. Old acquaintances offering hugs and "you go girl" affirmations. Even a few coworkers chimed in, ones who clearly didn't know the whole story. I stared at the screen, dumbfounded. It wasn't enough that she had betrayed me, now she was rewriting it all. Recasting herself not as the one who cheated, but the one who had escaped something suffocating. But she didn't know the truth had already started to leak. One of her colleagues, someone I'd barely met, sent me an anonymous email with a voice recording attached. In it, Julie was venting during a lunch break. She sounded irritated, defensive. If Simon shares those messages, I'll just say it was a separation period. Or that we were emotionally distant. People eat that up. Nobody questions a woman finding herself anymore. That last part stuck with me. Finding herself. Like I'd been a fog she had to escape. I sent the recording to my lawyer, who quickly drafted a cease and desist letter. We had already agreed on no public smearing as part of the settlement. She was in violation. She deleted the post the next day. I didn't hear from her after that. Not directly. But mutual friends said she pulled back from social events. That Charlie had been reassigned, rumor was, not by request. Apparently, he hadn't expected real consequences either. Funny how betrayal always feels like a secret until the spotlight hits. Nearly 2 years have passed. I live on the coast now. Small town. Slower days. I run a workshop out of a converted garage where I teach basic woodworking. Turns out creating something with your hands has a way of rebuilding what's been broken in your chest. I adopted a dog, a mutt named Leo, who follows me everywhere and growls at my reflection some mornings like he still doesn't recognize the man I've become. I don't blame him. Some days I don't either. I've kept to myself for the most part. Dated casually once or twice. Nothing serious. There's a scar that still flinches when touched. But I'm learning not to hide it. The house I live in now is simple. Quiet. The kind of quiet that doesn't feel like punishment. The kind where you can hear your own breath and not feel trapped inside your head. Sometimes I'll sit on the porch with a coffee, watching the ocean, and I'll think of her. Not in anger. Not with longing. Just curiosity. Wondering how someone can change so much and so little at the same time. What I've realized is this: love doesn't hide behind passwords or excuses. It doesn't require decoding. When it's real, it's steady. Safe. What Julie gave me in the end wasn't pain, it was perspective. I didn't just survive her betrayal. I outgrew it. And in the space where her lies once lived, I found something she never gave me. Peace.